Alright, so today we are going to be doing the oil pan on our 2005 Volvo S40i. This one, we bought this one off Amazon, ended up getting it for right around $100, so not too bad. Ours has a small hairline crack on there from one of the previous owners, so we're just going to go ahead and swap out the whole pan. Doesn't look like too bad of a job. There's a lot of bolts holding it on, and a couple of which are also bell housing bolts. One of the biggest things on this is on the back of the pan is the built-in oil cooler that you will have to swap over from the other one. And there's also two hoses that go to that we're going to change. Actually picked these hoses up off eBay. These ones are actually GM hoses for doing heater core deletes on LS based engines. These ones I got for about $9 each. They should work just fine. If you order the exact hoses for this one, they can be up to around $40 each. After doing those hoses, we will need to drain the coolant out of the system and also drain the oil. We will need to undo the serpentine belts and remove the AC compressor. Looks like we'll also have to unbolt some of the power steering lines. Hopefully I won't have to totally remove those. Should just be able to unbolt them and get them encouraged over just enough. Here you can see our leak, the hairline crack right there. So for now we're just going to start by draining the fluids out. Alright, let's get started. Alright, so got the coolant hoses off the back for the oil cooler. You can see where they go, right up here. One coming into the cooler, going back up to the heater. Both of those right there. Got those ones off. Those ones were a little bit of a biatch, only because of the placement of the clamps where they were put on. It was almost impossible to get to them to loosen them. Those are our two hoses, the ones we'll be replacing with the GM hoses that I got. Next what we gotta do, because we have to drop the AC compressor, take off both the serpentine belts. First one has a tensioner right there with the Torx. Also loosen up these power steering lines from their brackets. Looks like that tensioner is a T50. Alright, so if you were doing this job by yourself, to get the secondary belt off that runs the alternator, I believe it would make it much simpler if you totally remove this tensioner assembly. And then you'll be able to get a lot better access. Slide that belt off that idler up top first, and then get a lot more room to get the belt off. But if you got two people, one up top working it, you can get that down a little simpler. And then we'll start unbolting the AC compressor and unbolting these lines. Got the bolts out from the AC compressor. There's 3 bolts holding that on. Also, off, hard to see in there, 2 bolts from the power steering lines that they bolt up to the block, and had to undo 2 10mm bolts that go right up here for a bracket, also for the power steering cooler lines. And then you're able to get the AC compressor to drop down enough to gain access to the rest of these bolts up here. Got the oil cooler removed from the back of the oil pan, because there is more oil pan bolts that sit above the oil cooler that you can't get to with the cooler on. That one is held on with 4 T40 Torx bolts. We'll take out all of the oil pan bolts, as well as there is, I believe, 2 or 3 that are also bell housing bolts that need to be taken out. Alright, so it's kind of hard to see under here, but got the oil pan down. There's quite a few bolts that hold it up there. You do also have to pull out the oil dipstick. It says 1 10mm bolt holding it up by the oil filter housing, and then it just slides up out. Most of the bolts holding the oil pan, just about all of them are 10mm. You will need to pay attention to the ones on the front side up here by the crank. There's 3 bolts that are longer than the rest. All the other ones are the same. And also back here at the rear portion, there's 4 bolts that are quite a bit longer. It goes to the deep part of the oil pan. 3 bolts that work as bell housing bolts. One on the front, 2 on the back. Those ones are 14mm. We got the oil pan, the new oil pan, prepped and ready to install on the motor. We did do a thin coat of anaerobic sealer, which Volvo recommends for majority of their components. This one, we got the anaerobic gasket maker from Permatex. The part number is a 51813. Oil pan is on. AC compressor is mounted. Still need to put in the two 10mm bolts for this bracket for the power steering line, and also two, I believe, 15mm bolts for the bracket on this side. Got all these in. When you're doing this, make sure before you tighten anything down, get all the bolts in, especially these ones going to the bell housing. Make sure everything lines up properly, get them all close, and then go ahead and torque them all down. Got the brackets reattached for the steering lines that go by the AC compressor. This one is actually one of the hardest ones, because while it's not that bad you can see it right there, but this AC line comes up right in front of it, so it makes it kind of a pain to get that in there broken loose or to get it started. But we got that. We got the serpentine belts back on. Got the oil cooler installed with our GM hoses. Those are all tightened down. Good. We got our bolts back in for our bracket right here for the steering lines. All the oil pan bolts. Only thing left to do on it at the moment is put the dipstick tube back in, get that tightened up, fill it up with oil, fill it up with coolant, give it a test run, burp the cooling system, make sure there's no leaks,